This landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico. The rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazell was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO Classified. UFO Classified. No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Well, happy Fantopia Friday. I am Erica Lukes, happy to be here live tonight and get into chat and see Dave, Cook, Lib, Northern UFOs, all of my favorite people who go out of their way to support the show. I want to give Northern UFOs a big thanks, as always, for really going above and beyond to get my show out there to more people. Thank you very much. I was away last week. I went to LA to film a TV show, and then I spoke at a conference, and I'm so happy to be home. It was a great experience. I actually got to hang out with Nick Pope for a couple nights and have great conversations. He was there meeting an old friend from school from many, many years ago, and so it was fun to see both of them reconnect and just to pick his brain about things. I had a wonderful time. But I will tell you, the Michigan UFO conference has been my favorite. That was such a fun conference. And I think the thing that I loved about it, not only the people that put the show on, the location, but the fact that I was introduced to people who are new in my world and I think have a lot of relevance. One of those people is going to be on my show tonight, which will be super groovy. He has a lot of the same ideas on these window areas or hotspots, and I think that is truly the place where we need to focus our research. Steve Ward has been fascinated by the unexplained for over half a century. There were two events that had a major influence on Steve and set his course for a future path. He grew up in Michigan. The March of '66, a UFO flap occurred in his own backyard. The best, however, was yet to come because the following November, a winged humanoid chased two couples down a lonely country road near Point Pleasant, West Virginia. And, of course, we all know about Mothman. In a way, Steve would be chasing the Mothman the rest of his life. He's been influenced by the greats John Keel, Jacques Vallée. His views on UFOs became unconventional, and he moved toward a paranormal explanation. Hallelujah. While in Europe in '73, he stood at the foot of Stonehenge and on the shores of Loch Ness. In '76, he attended the MUFON Symposium in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and met Ray Stanford, who's been on the show, J. Allen Hynek. What a great, that must have been a treat. He was also able to interview Gray Barker of the Saucerian Publications, who was one of the attendees at that symposium. In '77, he made his first visit to Point Pleasant after reading the Mothman prophecies. In 1980, he joined the Navy and served aboard the USS Billfish, a nuclear fast attack submarine. Since 2006, he's been involved in the Mothman Festival, which I hope to get out to, behind the scenes and as a tour guide in the TNT area where Mothman was first seen. He's spoken at the Mothman Festival for the last 2 years, other venues. His main area are areas of high strangeness, window areas. I cannot wait to talk about this. He is involved with Roads Beyond the Known web series and is a correspondent on Mac Maloney's Military X-Files. How convenient for all of us here on KCOR. That is really cool. So, Steve, thank you. I'm like I was telling you before the show started, I'm happy that your dance card was free for me tonight.
Well, so am I. It's just really great to be here with you. It was an awful lot of fun to meet you, actually, at the UFO Contact event a few weeks ago.
You know, I know, and I wish I honestly could have stayed there for a month and just listened to you and John Tenney and it was an amazing experience, and I've been to several conferences, but I have to say it was such a great event, and Deb and RJ, their energy is so spectacular.
It's really nice because that was a first event for them, so I'm sure they were kind of on pins and needles, hoping everything would go well. But I have to tell everybody that didn't get a chance to go there, they had it ran so smoothly. The attention to detail, it was just phenomenal. And if there were any hiccups or glitches, nobody saw it because they just took care of everything.
And to hear them speak, I mean, they cared about the people that were there presenting, and they've had personal experiences. They've been on the show before, but I fell in love with them. And I hope I get to come out to your neck of the woods again and maybe to the Mothman conference, because I hear that is a fun time.
That's an amazing event. It's grown now to about 10,000 people. It's open. They've expanded it up and down the street, which is good. There is kind of a key area where if anybody knows what Point Pleasant looks like, you've got your main drag, and then you've got a crossroad, and at that crossroad is where the infamous Mothman statue is, which is very cool. Well, you go down that road, and that's where they put most of the vendors that are also speakers and so forth. And then they have up and down the street, they have all kinds of extraneous stuff. They've got a pole line, they've got plenty of food, and sometimes they even have a life-size Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. And
say it isn't so.
Yes. So and 1 year it got really, really crowded. So they expanded it. Like I say, the stuff that's not directly Mothman or paranormal related up and down the street, so there's a lot more room to move. And then if you go down a couple blocks, there's the old theater, which is where the speakers go. So the key areas are kind of easy to get to now and to move through. But it's really it started with some very humble beginnings. My first year was 2006, and that was their fifth outing, and I was grinning from ear to ear because it was that 1976 MUFON Symposium I had gone to in 76. And in between that and 2006, I'd only been to a few spirit fairs, So once I got to Mothman, you've got this incredible, always they have an incredible lineup of speakers. And I was able to speak one-on-one with, over the years with Rosemary Ellen Guiley, Stan Gordon, Nick Redfern, Ken Gerhart, Lyle Blackburn, and the list goes on. I mean, it is such a good event. And the only thing that cost a few bucks is the TNT hayride. Now, the TNT area is about 6 miles north of Point Pleasant. It's an old abandoned munitions dump, which is now the McClintock Wildlife Area. And it was a huge, if you ever look at the old black and white photographs of the way it looked during World War II, it was this amazing complex. Well, it was all abandoned, and even in the 1960s, there was an old power plant there, which is not there anymore. It was an old ruin, and that's where the Mothman was seen the first time. And it was back in those days, you could actually drive back in there. Now, a lot of what they call the igloo roads, these are the bunkers or the concrete igloos where they used to store the dynamite, because this was for the war effort where they made these munitions. And but now it's a really, I mean, you can, like I say, it's a wildlife area. You can walk back there. It is creepy as heck in the daytime, and especially at night. And they take, there's 3 of us that go through there, and like an old-fashioned hayride. And it's set up a little bit like a Halloween hayride with a few chills and thrills and a guaranteed flyover of the Mothman.
Oh, I'm so down. That sounds just up my alley. And that's interesting. Oh, I hope to experience that.
And I know Jeff Wansley is he was a co-founder of the festival. Carolyn Harris was the other lady that co-founded it, but she passed a couple years ago. Jeff is a great guy, and I have his ear I've been able to facilitate several speakers. So yeah, just let me know, because you'd be a perfect fit for the Mothman Festival.
Oh, I would absolutely love it. And thank you very much with the strange creatures that we see up near the Skinwalker area, it would be really fascinating. And there's similar creatures that we're seeing in these window areas, which I think is equally fascinating. So tell us, because I want to go into the Mothman and all of that, because you know so much of it. For people that don't necessarily know about that, give us the rundown.
Well, back in there was a researcher whose name I can't recall off the bat, but he wrote The Haunted Valley, a book on folklore of that area of West Virginia. Back around World War I, they were supposedly seeing some kind of a winged creature with a 12-foot wingspan and a human-like head with kind of reddish features. And it was seen over the Kanawha River Valley. Now, the Kanawha River flows into the Ohio River, and that's where the waters mingle. There's always a lot of mysticism, and mystery surrounding the folklore of where two rivers come together. In fact, Mary Hyre was the reporter that, allied herself with John Keel. John Keel was the author of the Mothman Prophecies and spent most of that year, 1966, 1967, in that area. And she wrote a column called Where the Waters Mingle. And when you flash forward a few years later, now, I don't know how long those sightings lasted, not very long, but the report said that people kept their children indoors because they were afraid of whatever this was. Well, then you flash forward to the 1960s. And now I guess there was a sighting earlier, a couple days earlier, but the really big one came on November 15th, 1966. There are two couples, the Scarberrys and the Mallets, and they were two married couples, and they were just cruising through this TNT area, which again was open at the time, and a lot of people would find romance there. They would park, and they would go through and just they would do what they called chasing parkers. So they would sneak up behind the unsuspecting couple and turn on their headlights, which I'm sure the couple appreciated very much. But as they were driving through there, they passed the old abandoned power plant, and they saw this humanoid figure with wings. And the outstanding feature of this thing were these two red glowing eyes. Linda Scarberry, who's one of the ladies, now she's no longer with us, but a couple years before she passed, I was able to interview her. She said it seemed like its wing was caught in a fence or something like that. So they just got the heck out of there. They were frightened. And this thing followed them into town. It followed them south on Route 62, and they hit speeds of nearly 100 miles an hour, which is not easy on that two-lane with all the winding turns. And it chased them into town. And that was the first big sighting. And then several other people started to see it. The local authorities were convinced that they had actually seen something because of their consistency in their stories. And they apparently, they looked like they were very much afraid. In the days that followed, this was turned out to be a real UFO hotspot. There were all kinds of strange lights going over all the time. The Lilly family lived on Camp Conley Road. Camp Conley was kind of the very southern border of the TNT area. And they had lights going over almost every night. And they even had, there was all kinds of things going on. People were having haunting phenomena, bedroom apparitions. They saw a strange man appear in the room. The Men in Black phenomena started in again. The first person to talk about that, of course, was Gray Barker, and they knew too much about flying saucers. And then John Keel started getting reports of these strange figures that would come to the door and tell people to not report their UFO sighting. Sometimes the conversations were just kind of pointless. That's another aspect. I just want, have you noticed in the phenomena where there seems to be a high strangeness aspect and an absurd factor to much?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
A lot of this, when I tell people, I talked about John Keel at the Mothman Festival. And I talked about the Mothman in general at the Van Meter Visitor Festival. And in both cases, I said, now look, when we start to get into the events that happened during the Mothman Prophecies, I want you to imagine we're watching a film, the previews to a movie coming up called The Mothman Prophecies. And you know how you get little flashes of different scenes and they don't make any sense. And you figure, well, when we see the movie, we're going to understand how it all comes together. Well, it doesn't. It never does come all together. There's the Indrid Cold phenomena. The people may be familiar from the movie. Richard Gere plays sort of a John Keel type character. And Indrid Cold, now the real individual was named Woodrow Derenberger, and he was going south on Route 77, and this elongated craft supposedly came by, kind of cut him off and landed, and the gentleman got out, fairly normal looking. His arms are crossed. He's dark complexioned, but he can't. Derenberger can't really place his ethnicity, and he asked him a series of just mundane questions like, "Where is he going? What does he do? What's the name of that city up there?" It's just bizarre. And John Keel, the researcher at the time, would have completely brushed it off, except that a couple days before that, he, through Mary Hyre, another man traveling on the same road, it turned out to be the same night, had a very similar experience. And this guy wasn't going to tell anybody. This other unknown person wasn't going to tell anybody. But he started having bad dreams. He started hitting the bottle, which was very unusual for him. So he came to Mary Hyre and he said, he described the same thing. He and his partner were driving down Route 77. This elongated craft landed and kind of cut them off. That same very mundane conversation, and then this guy leaves. It's hard to think of this as some kind of a visitor from another planet. But this other guy said to Keel, he said, I've decided not. I don't want you guys to publish this, not even anonymously. He said, that scientist fella that talked to me. And Keel said, what scientist fella? He says, well, he seemed like he knew what he was talking about. And he said, we should just forget about the whole thing. And so Keel said, well, how did he find out about this incident? Because you didn't tell anybody except me and Mary Hyre. And he said, the hell if I know. And so Keel, pushed that aside. And then the next day or so, Woodrow Derenberger came out. Only the difference is he went to the police. It was covered on the news. And the other difference was his visitor had a name, and his name was Indrid Cold.
And there's nothing right about that story. I mean, that just sends chills up your spine.
Well, then there was another incident a little bit later. Keel met a lady. It was across the river is Gallipolis, Ohio. And a lady he calls Mrs. Bryant, obviously not her name. She was having all kinds of bizarre stuff going on her farm. Her son was seeing these low-flying, he called them like flying boxcars, these big shadowy objects not making any noise, flying low over the trees. They had haunting phenomena, typical haunting phenomena in their house. She had animal mutilations, her cattle on her property. And one night in Gallipolis, after she went to work, she's in a vacant parking lot, and one of these elongated crafts comes down, and there's these two men. Now, she finds herself paralyzed. She can't move. And first she sees a flash of light, and then she's paralyzed and can't move. And these two men, again, similar to these other descriptions, dressed in coveralls, and they seem, people say they look like foreigners, and they're not very, it's very vague because they don't identify an ethnicity. More of that in a minute. But and so another pointless conversation that, who are you? Where are you going? And what is your time? So the whole thing is very dreamlike and nonsensical. There were police officers had close sightings of UFOs in the TNT area over some of the ponds. John Keel, at the time, he was covering stuff that was he was from New York, and so he was covering a lot of high strangeness going on Long Island and so forth, and a place called Mount Misery, which was a great name for an area. But he was covering. There was an incident where a family in Long Island. A family of 7. They're out in kind of a remote area. They see this circular craft come down. A black car pulls up. 2 men disembark from this UFO, normal-looking men. They get into the car, and the car drives away, and the UFO recedes, goes up in the air. There's just a million different stories about and then we get into a little bit later. We can get into some of the what he called silent contactees. But I alluded to the way some of these mysterious men look like. Now, when we say men in black, it's kind of a generic term because it doesn't necessarily mean that they're dressed in black suits with black fedoras, although many of them are. But John Keel had a whole series of photographs of different ethnic groups they would carry around with them. He said the one ethnic group that everybody hit on when he showed it to them were Laplanders. Laplanders, of course, living in northern Sweden. They have a little bit of possibly Asian features, with the eyes a little bit. Dark complexion. So, yes. And he wasn't saying they were Laplanders, but he said that's what people would hit on.
Well, and I just have to throw this in there. Everything that you've talked about sounds exactly like what's been going on up in the Uinta Basin near Skinwalker Ranch for the past 50 years. And, recently there have been quote unquote men in black sightings, but one of the people, and it's actually a white Audi now from what I hear, had, Asian type features.
Really?
Yes. So
that's so, you hear these stories and they're told by credible people, and a lot of the patterns are the same, but still it's so hard to wrap your mind around. And then you hear another more recent report like you just gave, and it's like, oh my God, there's something really going on here.
Oh, and the flying, box cars. I mean, all of this, it just is.
Sounds familiar.
I'm just sit here, and when I listen to you lecture, my jaw is and was on the floor, because how do you get all of this strangeness in one area? And we always think that Skinwalker Ranch is unique, but it isn't. And so what makes all of these places so unique? What is there?
Skinwalker seems to be pretty active now still. The Point Pleasant, while there is a lot of weird stuff going on, is not. I wish I could have been there in the 1960s to be in the midst of that. That was just phenomenal, all the stuff that was going on. But it doesn't seem to be going on to that degree now.
Well, it goes in waves, and I think that's something that we've kind of learned about, the Uinta Basin. It kind of ebbs and flows, and then you've got problems of where information is going, because now everything's so scattered with the internet and Facebook and social media. It's like you're not getting sightings into a few key people, and I think that's unfortunate.
Yeah, that is too bad.
But I have to say, Lib, before we go to break, because we've got 1 minute till break, but is the old factory still accessible?
The old power plant?
Mm-hmm.
No. I was actually there in 1977, took photographs, but they tore it down in unfortunately, the 1990s. It was a pretty dangerous place to wander in. That's why they tore it down, because people had hurt themselves in there.
Interesting. Okay. And so we'll have to talk more about that. And I'm excited to hear about the silent contactees and all of this. Oh my gosh, this is so much fun. I'm Erica Lukes. I'm here with Steve Ward, and I want to just tell you that I had a great time in Michigan, and I cannot wait to go to the Mothman conference. This will be wonderful. And Steve, we get to hang out again, which I look forward to. I want to thank all of you for getting into chat. Keep asking questions. Feel free to call in. Stick around for a great night on KCOR, and the best is yet to come. So stick around.
Stand by.
This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified.
UFO Classified
with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
Here's what happened on the last episode of Three Guys, No Ties.
An off-duty New York City police officer reportedly hired a Brooklyn prostitute who ended the night by stealing his personal car and service weapon when he stopped at an ATM to pay her.
Oh, how messy does this get?
Three Guys, No Ties. Wednesday nights, 7 to 9 Pacific, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is your captain. I'd like to welcome you on Jackpot Airlines Flight 1610, service to Lost Wages.
They say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Well, apparently, they need a reality check done Vegas style.
Vegas, 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 Vegas.
Tune in Wednesday nights, 9 p.m. Pacific, 12 a.m. Eastern, for Reality Check, hosted by Jessica Johns, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Biggest star in the world, bigger than Britney and Christina put together.
If it's happening on the Vegas Strip, you'll know about it here first.
You are a dirty little fun haver.
Join Jessica Johns as she explores and goes behind the scenes of what's hot and what's not. From the best entertainment Vegas has to offer to national celebrity gossip.
That's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Jessica has her finger on the heartbeat of the city, and she's waiting to share it with you. Reality Check, hosted by Jessica Johns. Wednesday, 9 p.m. Pacific, 12 a.m. Eastern. She does Vegas right.
Yeah, baby.
Hamilton was adopted from a rescue in 2008. How could you not love him?
Hamilton the Pug's adoption story started at a shelter. Visit theshelterpetproject.org to find a pet near you. Brought to you by Maddie's Fund, the Humane Society of the United States, and the Ad Council.
It's great. I think it's great. It's great.
The all-new KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Great. Please make a note of it. It's great.
Friday night, 9 p.m. Pacific. Jump onto the Celestial Highway and travel at the speed of light. Into hyperspace. 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 Hosted by Solaris Blue Raven. She navigates you through the cosmic tides of mysticism into the world of covert technology, UFOs, mystical sciences, and the world of unforeseen forces.
You get to really sort of enjoy a bizarre ride.
Listen live, Friday night, 9 p.m. Pacific, for Hyperspace, the one show that blows the whistle off our government black ops projects. Hyperspace, hosted by Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris Blue Raven, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Want to take a ride? Take a ride. Take a ride.
You're listening to UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
Well, welcome back and happy Fantopia Friday. I am happy to be here on KCOR. I have to give a shout out and a big hug to Tina Marie and all of my listeners. Thank you for making the station so great, and thank you for supporting the show. I am here every week, unless I'm traveling, because I believe that there are so many things that we need to be aware of. And right now, especially, we are living in a time of disinformation, a time of trying to really marginalize the subject and steer the narrative. So it is imperative that each and every one of you do not look to the internet for answers for this. If you've had personal experiences, hold them close to your heart and don't ever let anybody tell you what your experience means. And then I feel very, very strongly about that. I am here because I care about experiencers and people who have seen things and who have been perplexed and looking for a place to go. So I'm grateful for all of you and your support. I am here tonight with somebody that I met a few weeks ago in Michigan, and I immediately knew that I had to know him because his research is just off the hook. He is an incredible researcher in Michigan who's been influenced by John Keel and Jacques Vallée. He has been spoken at the Mothman Festival, but he was telling us in the last half an hour, about the Mothman, and how in this area there were flying boxcars, people. And I want to get into this, but injured cold, and the 2 sightings, and just all of the things that are very strikingly similar to what's taking place in the Uinta Basin. And I love, Steve, that you are researching window areas, and you understand that it is not one thing that we can put into a box. This is many different things, and they're happening in these window areas. So thank you. You're so refreshing.
Well, I felt the same way when I met you first. I didn't know, where your research had taken you. So I was also very happy that we were on the same page in many ways. But I always have thought that now some people will call them window areas or portals or vortexes or high strangeness areas. Whatever term you want is fine. But I've always thought that, what is it that where all these things come together in one area? We do have researchers that are pretty focused on cryptids or Bigfoot. We have other researchers that are very focused on UFOs. A friend of mine, Brian Seach, who he and his wife run the Center for Unexplained Events in the Pittsburgh area. He was out in an area in Pennsylvania, a area where Bigfoots have been seen and heard, a very, very active area, kind of a remote area. And they were out doing a typical Bigfoot hunt, I guess you could say it. And they look up in the sky and they see this strange meandering light. So they're looking for a Bigfoot. They get a UFO. The thing's making these impossible maneuvers. It disappears. Then it reappears a little bit later and keeps making these strange maneuvers. So then, of course, we have the research of Stan Gordon in Pennsylvania, 1973, 1974. A rash of UFO sightings, but they were also accompanied with, and I'm going to say, some really bizarre Bigfoot reports. Green glowing eyes. One was shot point blank with a shotgun. The lady heard some commotion on her porch, thought it was the dogs getting into the garbage. She comes out with her shotgun and sees this thing. She called it a gorilla from her perspective. It put its arms up in the air. She shoots it point blank, and it disappears in a hail of sparks. So how do we process that? I mean, it's strange enough anyway to be talking about a Bigfoot report, but how do we process that in any context anyway? So anyway, in short, I've always thought that it's perfectly fine for people to specialize into certain areas, but it seems that there's got to be some reason where there are these points like the Skinwalker Ranch, like the Bradshaw Ranch, like Marley Woods, where all these seemingly different types of phenomena come together.
And so I have to ask you, when all of the things were taking place with the Mothman, what was the interest? Was the military out there investigating, or was there what happened there? Because of course, when you've got specific areas like this that are hotspots, there has to be some sort of intelligence there trying to figure out what's going on.
There probably was. I don't think it was too much on John Keel's radar at the time, although occasionally they would see a lot of strangers in town, definitely government types. With the close-cropped hair and government suits and so forth, not your high strangeness men in black, for lack of a better word. So there did seem to be that their hands were in it. There was some kind of surveillance going on, and I think the National Guard does maneuvers out there in the general TNT area. So yeah, there always does seem to be some kind of a military presence, but it wasn't something that apparently was on John Keel's radar at the time. It would be interesting to know what might have been going on then. But see, it seems to me that the military would be very interested in these areas, because they would. I think that they would want to see if there's some way they could exploit it and weaponize these energies or whatever it might be. That would be the first thing that would be on their minds, I think. There must be some level in the government that recognizes that, yes, there's something really strange going on, and we need to try and understand it, even though they would never admit it.
And that is the thing. I mean, when there's this sort of, we know, To the Stars, the DeLong group. I mean, they are definitely, at least they're getting the word out there. But I mean, there is they are showing us that, yes, the government has taken an interest. That's something that we've known about for a long time, even though the United States government has chosen to minimalize and marginalize the people who've experienced things and the subject, which I think is very unfortunate. But the more I learn, the more I'm just sitting there in disbelief of all of this.
Like I said, there was so much going on. He would go, the TNT area became impossible to get into. There were actually people out there that were going to bag the Mothman, right? So they're out there with their shotguns and hundreds of people parading back and forth in cars. So John Keel and Mary Hyre, the reporter, and some other people, they kind of they went south, a little bit south to a place called Gallipolis Ferry, a few miles south of Point Pleasant. And that's a pretty lonely, desolate place now. I mean, there's a lot of houses in the hollers on the roads and so forth. But boy, there's a lot of space in between where people live. And can imagine what it was like 50 years ago. And he found a particular area which we were able to find at least one of the areas that he used to have a sky watch on. And so we have been down there a few times, but never saw anything. You have to be kind of careful because you don't want to trespass on somebody's property in West Virginia. That's a really bad idea. But he and Mary Hyre and others would do sky watches, and they would see all kinds of strange stuff go over. He also went down, not too far from that area, to what they call the Chief Cornstalk hunting grounds, or the Chief Cornstalk wildlife area. And one night he saw a series of like purple lights up in the trees, and they even came down close to him one time. They were about basketball size. They surrounded him. He had the impression that it was almost like they were living beings, some kind of living energy. And one night he looked down at one of the valleys, and the forest turned purple. So the next day he goes to the local farmer there, and he said, did you see this? Have you ever seen this before? And he says, oh yeah, the forest does that every once in a while, ever since I was a kid. But he said, I won't go near there because one time one of my dogs ran into the forest when it was lit up like that and never came back. So, that's another spoke in the wheel of the high strangeness that was going on in Point Pleasant. There were some classic abduction experiences, although people didn't know much about the abduction phenomenon at that time, and there wasn't much of that reported. People would have missing time. People would have certainly the trappings of a modern day abduction experience, but it just wasn't that much on the radar. There were some animal mutilations at the time, too. So you had this three-ring circus of the paranormal going on in the Ohio Valley.
And I love all of this. And so were people, when you have interviewed people that have had these sightings, I mean, obviously when you're seeing these tall creatures, you're scared out of your mind. But with some of these other types of sightings, how did people feel when they were seeing this? Were they frightened? Was there a sense of awe?
I've interviewed about 6 people that saw the Mothman. Now, they didn't all see quite exactly the same thing. John Keel interviewed a little over 100 people over that period of a year. And they were very, not everybody was exact, but it was very similar, about 7 foot tall, grayish, dark color, about a 10-foot wingspan, red glowing eyes. And before I get to answer your question, I should mention that, it's a good question as to what was the Mothman. Well, it doesn't fit a biological entity. The wingspan doesn't seem to be wide enough to pick up something, a man or a humanoid that size. It sometimes is seen to take off straight up like a helicopter without flapping its wings. The red glowing eyes didn't seem to be like eye shine. It seemed like it was generating its own light. So it was almost like an apparition. It just didn't make any sense. Now, Tom Urey, I talked to him, and he saw a large bird. He saw more of what you would call a thunderbird. It had about a 10-foot wingspan. He couldn't identify the bird. He was in his convertible in the general area of Point Pleasant, and he's vehement about what he saw. He said he'd take a lie detector test, and he said, it was not a condor, it was not this, it was not that. And originally he thought that the other people had seen the same thing he did, but it was because of the freak out factor. They saw something, they added details to it. But finally, he was able to talk to Marcella Bennett. She was a lady that very early when the Mothman sighting started, she and her brother went out to the TNT area. Some friends of hers, the Thomases, lived there, and they went there, and they weren't there. Just their children were there, so they were going to come back home. And her brother was trying to get her attention because there was some strange light up in the sky. And all of a sudden, this thing, the Mothman, rises up out of the ground, freaks her out. She actually drops her child briefly. And then she grabs the child, and they both run into the house, and they lock the door. And this thing, whatever it was, is walking back and forth across the porch and looking in the window. So anyway, Tom Urey, again, the guy that saw one of the Thunderbird, he and Marcella Bennett went to Katanning, Pennsylvania. This is when they were doing promotion for the Mothman film, which they actually filmed there. Katanning substituted for Point Pleasant. And so he said, okay, I'll tell you your story. You tell me, you tell me your story, I'll tell you mine. And so he came to the conclusion was that they actually had seen something different, because she was vehement about what she saw, kind of a humanoid creature with wings. But he saw definitely it was a very, very large bird. I talked to a lady, I'm going to forget her last name, Patricia. It'll come to me. She believes, she and her husband were missionaries. And very shortly, right around the time this thing started, and they didn't know anything that was going on because they left the next day as missionaries to go to a foreign country. And they were there for several years. Well, the night before that, the Mothman appeared to them in their bedroom like a bedroom apparition. It's the same kind of description as many of the other ones. This tall being with red glowing eyes. She believes it's demonic. So, and they were very frightened by it, and they went to their Christian faith to try to combat it. So it was years later they came back, because they hadn't had any news about Point Pleasant or whatever, and they saw the old articles on the Mothman, and they thought, my God, that's what we saw materialize in our bedroom. No thanks. Chase me in the car. Okay, yep, no. That's all right. So here's what I tell people. What disciplines, what scientific disciplines do we need to determine what the Mothman was? Well, Andy Colvin, he's known as the Mothman's photographer, a Mothman researcher. He believes the Mothman is more of an angelic presence, more like akin to the Garuda of Hindu mythology. So Patricia believes it's demonic. There are others that think it's just a cryptid. Others think it's just something out of folklore. So what do we need? What do we need to be? An angelologist, a demonologist, a biologist, a zoologist, a cryptozoologist, an exobiologist? What knowledge base do we need to determine what this thing was? It's very elusive, like so many of the cryptids that you have studied out there on the Skinwalker Ranch. Very, right. Very elusive.
And I think it's important to note, and when we're looking at all of these different viewpoints of, whether this is demonic, and we see this a lot in the UFO world, or the paranormal world. I mean, we're putting labels on things, and that is based on our own upbringing and belief systems. And I think I see this big trend in ufology towards saying everything is demonic and reptilian and all of this nonsense. And or even in the paranormal. I mean, I've had experiences in my life where I've had up close and personal with people around me, ghost sightings, all sorts of things. And I never felt that it was demonic. I was curious, but I think people who have a very religious upbringing would interpret what I was seeing as demonic. And so how do we avoid that bias?
Well, I think that what we need is, and I want to address the folklore close encounter connection in a moment, but I think what we need to look at is a third rail, so to speak. And that is, whatever this phenomena is, however it manifests, I think that much of it has given rise to the belief in demons and so forth. It's just one interpretation. I don't think it is classic demonology in the old sense. there's something else going on here. But I can see easily how people would interpret it as, the fire and brimstone. Brimstone was the smell of sulfur, and so many of these things have that smell connected with them. And some of these demons had the red glowing eyes, as do some Bigfoot creatures and other cryptids. When you look at, you mentioned briefly Jacques Vallée, and I was a very happy guy back in the 1960s. I was a very happy kid, reading reports of, remember APRO, the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, Jim and Cora Lorenzen?
Absolutely.
Oh, they kind of broke with the tradition of now NICAP was the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, run by Major Kehoe. He was happy to talk about UFOs and unexplained objects in the sky all day, but boy, they did not want to talk about the landings and the strange little humanoid creatures that would disembark from the craft. But Jim and Cora Lorenzen, they did collect these reports. They did talk to these people. And I was very convinced at that time we were dealing with a strict ET explanation, and these were just visitors from other planets checking us out. And then I read John Keel's UFOs Operation Trojan Horse, which came out before the Mothman Prophecies. And that was sort of a paradigm destroyer for me, because Keel is the one that recognized the connection between, just as we've been talking about, the connection between all different paranormal events. And he hypothesized the idea of ultra-terrestrials. Now, it sounds fancy. It was actually a term he borrowed from Ivan Sanderson. Sanderson, of course, was the great British naturalist that wrote The Abominable Snowman, Legend Come to Life, and other great books on UFOs. And it simply meant was Keel did not suspected that whatever this was a natural condition of the planet. So ultra-terrestrial instead of extraterrestrial. He used it as a literary device. He wasn't trying to be real literal. He was just trying to understand, he said, what he called it the cosmic mechanism behind the phenomena. He got to the point where he wasn't that concerned about what he called the facade. He didn't care if the craft had a dome or portholes or landing pods. He didn't care if the creature was hairless or had hair or wings or horns or whatever. He thought that these were, and I love this word, transmogrifications of energy, and that somehow there was sort of a reflective factor. And if you look at the way the UFO phenomena has changed over the years, you have. We used to have fairy lights, and then you had the airships, the mysterious airships of 1897, these big dirigible-like craft that were just a little bit ahead of our time. And then you had the ghost planes up in Sweden in the 40s, and then you had the Foo Fighters, the strange lights that would follow the World War II planes, both Russian and German and American. And then you had the more modern-day version of UFOs landing, the egg-shaped craft, the little creatures getting out. He suspected that that there might be a reflective factor where this was sort of, let's see, how can I put this? It's almost like we were co-creating this with this energy or whatever it was. He wasn't saying that we were hallucinating. These were real transmogrifications. They were temporal manifestations where they were paraphysical and could leave landing marks, and they could actually affect the environment. He just wasn't sure that we were actually dealing literally with ET or with unknown creatures, if that makes any sense. It's kind of hard to get your mind around. Okay, good.
No, it does make sense. It makes perfect sense, and I think that's something that we overlook when we try to put things in a box and we try to study one thing and we omit a big portion of data. It's like, does this? I mean, I know for me with a couple of my own personal sightings and experiences, I mean, whatever this is interacts with me, and so am I co-creating what's taking place? I don't know, but I feel that is you're on absolutely. He was onto something. You're onto something, and I think I commend you for looking into this.
Well, there was more to it than that. There was a time when I thought that we were dealing with a sort of a planetary poltergeist, where all this, it was just reflective of us. That somehow these deep buried archetypes were manifesting in some way or other. Now, there's a lot of things I couldn't explain, like why these certain archetypes and so forth. But there's more to it than that. There is, because I also believe that coupled with it somehow, we are dealing with some other intelligence. That other intelligence may be ET, extra-dimensional, hidden civilization, elemental. I don't know, but it's not to look at it purely in the way Keel talked about it. I think there's more to it than that. And even he admitted that. He said in a Fate magazine in 2002, he said, look, when he proposed the ultra-terrestrial theory, that was just one idea. And he also, while a lot of people think that he completely rejected the ET theory, he said he didn't actually. He left the door open just a little bit, but he just thought that a lot of the things that were happening and the manifestations that were occurring, you needed to go somewhere else to explain them than simply visitors from other worlds.
Absolutely. And I wonder, and I would really like to do an in-depth study someday in my free time about when, the extraterrestrial hypothesis first burst onto the scenes, because I would be willing to bet that was a narrative that was maybe put out there on purpose. I don't know.
Well, there are actually contactees that go back into the 1800s where they supposedly took trips, or was it John Dee, I think was one of them. And a lot of them are channeled, we can get into channeling a little bit too, but channeled experiences. But this thing has been around for a while.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's interesting to me that we don't respect it. And I believe truly that indigenous peoples, they respected it. They knew where these energy centers, window areas were. And that's why they built, they constructed sacred sites to maybe keep people out, to hold that space for whatever this is. And I think that we've been so emboldened, because we are the smartest thing on the planet. And so we're going to go there and we're going to disrupt this energy. And when we do that, bad things happen. People are frightened. I don't know. It's to me, there's so many questions about all of it.
I know. We're never going to find the complete answer, I don't think. We're making progress, though. We are putting some of the pieces together.
Yes, and I love it. And I'm Erica Lukes here on UFO Classified. I'm here with Steve Ward. We're going to take a break. It's our longer break, but we will be back. And rest assured, of course, we are going to rock it out. The best is yet to come, for sure.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at UFOclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified. UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.
The disc landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico. The rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazell was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Welcome back to the second half of UFO Classified. I am always happy to be here on KCOR and to get into chat and see all of my friends who know that there is something so important there, and all of you are looking for good information that has nothing to do with the secret space program and some of these rabbit holes that I truly believe are kind of being put out there to distract us away from the truth. And what we need to focus on are these window areas. When I found Steve Ward at the Michigan UFO conference, I thought, hallelujah, sweet baby Joseph, I have found a kindred spirit. Steve is researching and open-minded enough to understand that there is more than a specific place, a UFO or a Bigfoot or a ghost. I mean, this is all interconnected, and we have to look at all of this, and we have to take it very, very seriously. Steve Ward has been fascinated by the unexplained for over half a century. There were two major influences on his life. One was UFO Flap in '66, but then also the Mothman, and we've been talking about that and many other things, gorillas, strange lights, all of these things. But when we left off, we were just talking about the cosmic mechanism behind all of this and co-creating. And so, I mean, please continue, because I am on the edge of my seat.
Well, it's just that I think that, like, as I said before, there was a time when I thought that was the complete explanation, that the somehow we think of many say that poltergeist phenomena is sort of an unconscious release of mental energy, and that probably is true in some cases, but it doesn't seem to explain all of it. But I thought that, maybe a lot of this that was going on was sort of a planetary poltergeist, where for whatever reason, these basic underlying archetypes, Carl Jung talked about the reason we say these circular objects in the sky, the mandala, it's some kind of a desire for completeness and wholeness. And, there's others that talk about other archetypes where, do you recall the film Forbidden Planet?
Yes.
Great classic science fiction. Remember the MacGuffin? It was this lost race that had become extinct, but they left this incredible technology behind. They were the Krell, and they left this device behind that could transmute thoughts into physical things. And as the movie goes on, you find out that that's what destroyed them, because what they forgot were the creatures from the id. That's ID, via Sigmund Freud, the dark side of the subconscious. And so they created unwittingly their own monsters, which came back to destroy them. Well, some of the stuff that we deal with, that people report, it's almost like they are phantasms. That's another word I use when I talk about the events that happened in the Ohio Valley during the advent of the Mothman prophecies. Phantasm, because they don't seem like we're dealing with perfectly physical things. So it just seems that that's part of it. That these experiences have something to do with us, but that doesn't explain everything. There's a lot of things it does not explain. For example, if we're talking about these different archetypes, the mandala, the UFOs, the strange creatures, or whatever, which maybe are just sort of part of us, part of that darker side, it still, it just doesn't completely explain everything. For example, there's all kinds of things held in consciousness, like, why don't we see Harry Potter flying around on a broom? Or Professor Dumbledore, because these things are so ingrained in human consciousness. We only see certain things. We see these strange objects in the sky. We see cryptids. We just see certain categories of things.
Right.
So that just doesn't explain everything. Also, if one crashed saucer report is true, and I think many of them are probably not, but if one is true, that puts it right in the realm of the physical. The alien implant phenomena. I don't, it's possible that this is some kind of high-tech black ops thing, and maybe some of it is, but it doesn't seem like all of it is. I mean, I've come to the conclusion, and for a while I was with John Keel, and I pretty much rejected the ET hypothesis. But I've come full circle and think, no, there's also, besides this mechanism in human consciousness that is reflective and seems to co-create this phenomena, we must be dealing with some other intelligence. The others among us, as Albert Rosales would call them. There's just too many reports, and I mean, think of your own research, your own experience. Think of the variety of bizarre humanoid encounters. You're familiar with Bob Pratt, who wrote UFO Danger Zone? These really incredible encounters in South America. I mean, violent stuff where they were grabbing backwoods farmers in the middle of nowhere and trying to pull them up into craft. And these are people that back in, I think, the 80s, where they had there's no pop culture they were introduced to, where it would be kind of improbable for them to be making up these stories. And that brings up another thing. I know I'm going stream of consciousness here, but think of, predominantly nowadays we have the grays. Okay, well, there was a time period, you go back to the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, where you could barely find a gray. You had quite a variety of humanoids. I always joke that the grays came along and spoiled everything because we had this great variety to pick from. But so what's going on here? Are the grays a physical race that came in and pushed the other ones out? Or does this kind of lead to the idea that perhaps these things aren't, actual permanent physical beings, but they perhaps change or transmogrify depending on, the way we view them? I wanted to bring in the folklore connection a little bit because Jacques Vallée, he was a computer scientist. He came over from France in the 1960s, became a colleague of Dr. J. Allen Hynek. And actually, if you remember the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the French character, the Frenchman in there, was based on the real Jacques Vallée, kind of a nod to him. But anyway, he wrote a book called Passport to Magonia. And I had just barely recovered from reading UFO's Operation Trojan Horse. I read Magonia and I thought, oh no, here we go again. Because he made the case that if you go into stories of folklore with the elementals, the fairies and so forth, and compare them to at least some modern day UFO experiences, you're talking about pretty much the same thing. For example, sometimes the little people, the fairies, they wear little red caps and have little green suits. Well, if you took off their little cap and green suit, put them in a silver suit and with a helmet, they looked a lot like some of the more modern day UFO encounters, especially in the 60s and 70s. The perilous aspect, where people would come across a humanoid, they'd see a light or whatever, and then they couldn't move. That was part of fairy lore. Let's see, what else? The fairy rings. We have crop circles nowadays. Back in the 1960s, we had something much simpler and easier to wrap your head around. We called them saucer nests. And people would see the strange light or craft come down on the field. They go there the next day to check it out and see the circular depressed area. Well, it looked just like the fairy rings of old. And in the fairy rings of old, you would see the fairy lights or UFOs or orbs or whatever you want to call them moving around them. There's so many parallels. The missing time aspect. Missing time is common knowledge nowadays in UFO encounters, UFO literature, and so forth. The same thing happened to those that were spirited away by the fairies, only instead of getting that unscheduled medical exam, they were usually whisked away to the inside of a mountain or an underground kingdom. And of course, there's all kinds of beliefs in underground UFO bases as well. So many parallels there. But I think we're probably dealing with a third rail. I'm not suggesting that leprechauns are driving flying saucers. And I'm not suggesting that UFO pilots at one time used to wear little green suits with little red hats. It seems like I think there may be some other, a third way, a third source that is responsible for both of them.
And absolutely, when you look back, through history, and Jacques Vallée has done a wonderful job. I mean, he had his latest book, The Collectible, and I'm totally blanking help me out. Oh my gosh, the wonderful book.
Forbidden Science series? Or
no,
is
it's not Forbidden Science. It's the beautiful black book that's the collector's items. The collector, oh my gosh, total blank.
Sequel? Oh, see, he did a...
Mysteries in the Skies? Mysteries, oh my gosh. Okay, anyway, somebody will help me out.
Is it kind of the sequel to Magonia, where he and Chris Aubuck wrote?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't remember the name either, but yes, he continued what he started in Magonia. And boy, just, this stuff has been with us forever.
It hasn't. It is so fascinating that with the new generation, it's just a different way of explaining or rationalizing the same type of phenomenon. And I love that. The fairy rings, the saucer nests, it's really intriguing to me. And I want to kind of get into some of the other sightings reports that you were talking about with the silent contactees.
Oh, yes.
It sounds very fascinating.
Well, let's define some terms here first, so that people know what we're talking about. Usually, when we talk about the contactees or the contactee movement, we're talking about the 50s and 60s, and these were people that claimed that they had these usually beautiful contacts with, long-haired, beautiful Venusians. Usually, they talked about beings that supposedly came from planets with our own solar system, like George Adamski, and he supposedly had his meeting with Orthron in the desert in 1951, I think. There were several of them. And a lot of them are kind of pretty dubious. There's some it's interesting to get into the contactees, though, because no matter what, even though some of them seem to have been outright hoaxes, you keep following these threads. And I don't know if you found this, but there are elements that seem like there's a certain reality to them. Even like we talked about Woodrow Derenberger. It seems like his initial experience was real because two other people had similar experiences. But as time went on, he seemed to embellish some of these experiences that were not true. So you get this strange mixture. Okay, but anyway, those are the contactees we usually think. Now, there's still people that we would put in that category today. The same type of contact, usually very positive, beautiful beings. But again, there's no template, because Dana Howard, she was one of the few female contactees at the time. She contacted a lady she said was named Diane from Venus. But her first contact with Diane was through a seance. It wasn't through a landing of a bell-shaped scout craft in the desert. Okay. Abductees, we think the classic abduction experience, usually with the Greys or whatever. The first really big one that was reported was Betty and Barney Hill in the early 1960s. And that's a completely different situation. The abductees are not, contacted by the beautiful beings. They're taken by force. They're examined and so forth. So there's that distinction there. But the more you get into the literature, sometimes there are certain cases that tread both sides. It's very difficult to, define these things and put them in just perfect categories. Okay. John Keel was, he was a term he used called silent contactee. And these were people that he was in contact with several people at the time. They were in the Ohio Valley, they were in Long Island and so forth. But during this period between November 15th, 1966 and December 15th, 1967, when the Silver Bridge collapsed, when sort of most of this stuff ended, the Silver Bridge spanned between Point Pleasant and Gallipolis over the Ohio River. So these people firmly believed, the silent contactees, that they were in contact with some other intelligence. And sometimes it seemed like it was a sort of a channeling thing. Sometimes they seemed to report that they were talking to a real physical being, but they firmly believed it, and they didn't care if anybody else did, because they were not seeking publicity. That's why he called them silent contactees. And he happened onto several of them just doing his general investigation. They did not come to him and say, hey, guess what? But they were also getting prophecies. They were getting predictions, hence the name, the Mothman prophecies. And some of them would come true, plane crashes and so forth. But he found, I'm sure, Erica, you're very familiar and know all about the trickster aspect of so much of this, especially with the Skinwalker Ranch.
Yes.
There was a heavy element of that, because he said that I think there was a gentleman, I forget, I think it might have been Long Island, where he'd had several predictions come true. And then there was the big one. You get your people together because the world's going to end. You get them on the hill, and the UFOs will come down and take you away. And, of course, nothing happens. So they get these real predictions, real things happen, and then they're abandoned. He said there was a woman that sometimes they would be given quests, these crazy quests. This one woman was in Brooklyn, was sent on a quest by one of these so-called intelligences to find some kind of a mysterious crucifix in Brooklyn of all things. And, of course, she never found it. And then over time, and this comes to the culmination of the Mothman Prophecies book, they were getting, the thing is that these people, some of these silent contactees didn't know each other, but they were in contact with John. And so they started getting the same general kind of predictions. And it was going to be that there was this, some kind of a strange EM effect. Now, electromagnetic, who knows? But some kind of a strange EM effect was going to occur in the middle of December 1967. And then as time went on, it became more crystallized. It would be December 15th. It would be when President Johnson lit the lights for the Christmas tree in Rockefeller Center. And so now Keel was not in Point Pleasant at that time. But he said he bought it hook, line, and sinker. There's a chapter in the Mothman Prophecies where it's called Paranoiacs Are Made, Not Born. And when Art Bell interviewed him for the Mothman Prophecies movie, he said the one thing that the film really got right, he said, was the feeling of paranoia that I felt at that one point. So here he is. He's held up in his New York apartment. He's got water there. He's got candles because one of the predictions was that there was going to be so many days of darkness across the whole U.S. when this Christmas tree is lit. And again, there was some kind of a prediction about a particular air crash that did occur. So he's ready. He thinks something's going to happen when the Christmas tree lights are lit. And, of course, nothing happens. But then maybe within a half hour later, the news flash comes over the TV that the bridge that spanned between Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and Gallipolis, Ohio, has collapsed. Again, it was just after 5 o'clock. The sun's almost down. It's 20 degrees. Rush hour traffic, Christmas traffic, and 46 people lost their lives that night. So here's what's the strange, was it misdirection? Was it some kind of a trickster phenomena? Was the message clear, but somehow we couldn't perceive it properly? I mean, what the heck is going on here? Something real is happening, but is elusive. It's like a will-o'-the-wisp. We can't grasp it.
And you're recounting all of this, and I just have chills because I have spent a considerable amount of time at the special archives at the University of Utah, and I've been going over the lifetime's work of Dr. Frank Salisbury, who wrote the Utah UFO display and really helped with Junior Hicks put Skinwalker Ranch in the Uinta Basin on the map. But in reading some of his exchanges with quote-unquote contactees and his personal letters, there was a time where he felt that he was so immersed in this that he didn't have the ability to look at this objectively. Oh. And, I mean, it's a very similar thing to what you were just describing, and he had to just step back.
That's what Keel got into. Now, Keel also believed that certain people were tuned into this. Now, I'm not one of them. I've had a couple odd experiences, but he thought that when he talked about the ultra-terrestrials and transmogrification and so forth, he talked about the hypothesized the super spectrum, which goes beyond the visible and invisible light spectrum. That there were certain people. He had a catchphrase. Ask the contactee or the experiencer what they had for breakfast. And that was just meant, find out about the individual. Don't worry about so much about what they saw or how fast the object went or how many creatures there were. Find out, because he found that the people that were seeing these things, whether they be UFOs or cryptids or whatever, or haunting phenomena, they had psychic abilities or latent psychic abilities. They were just somehow tuned in. And if somebody was to see a UFO, the chances are they would see another one at some point. It wasn't just a one-time shot for the most part. They also might see a Bigfoot. So he was very, very interested in the individual. and what they were all about.
And now we see similar parallels with some of the research that Gary Nolan is doing, looking at the antennas or the actual experiencers and all of that. And I think, it's the same thing. And he was such a forward-thinking man.
Gary Nolan?
I think Nolan is as well, but some of the things that Keel was looking at.
Yeah, it's so great that Keel has sort of been rediscovered, because for a while there, the only book that stayed in print, I think, was Prophecies. And he was being forgotten and actually being maligned in some ways. But Nick Redfern, in one of his recent books, wrote how John Keel was ahead of his time. Rosemary Ellen Guiley, in the foreword to a book that's coming out on John Keel this spring by Brett Rains, wrote how John Keel was ahead of his time. He saw the interconnectedness of all paranormal phenomena. So, yes, people that know me know that I can't barely get through a sentence without saying, well, John Keel said, John Keel wrote, John Keel believed, and ad nauseum, I guess. But yes, he has been a major influence and always will be.
And I love looking at his work, and and I think Brett Rains has all of his archives available online. Am I correct?
Yes, and he allowed me to look at the PDF of some of his new book coming out, so that I could give a good talk on John Keel at the Mothman Prophecies. By the way, I proposed a toast to John Keel at the end of my talk. Of course, I had to use a can of Pepsi because of state, local, and federal laws. But I toasted. I hit the microphone. I gave a nice little thing about here's to John Keel, the mentor I never knew, and so forth. And I had everybody say, hear, hear. And it went over very well.
I love it. I love talking with you. And we're going to take a break, and this is our last break. Steve, thank you so much for being here. Where can people find out about your work really quickly?
I'm on Facebook, Steve Ward. Roads Beyond the Known is a web series that will be coming out sometime this fall. And I've got some really, really good, talented people behind this. I'm the historian because I've been at this a long time. So you too can be a historian if you do this for several decades.
I love it. Now, I will keep people posted about your work. America Lukes here with UFO Classified. We will be right back.
Stand by.
This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
With Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
1 million miles till midnight. A story of timelines, artificial worlds, simulated races, and the galactic imprint, and the destiny of a blue world called Earth. 1 million miles till midnight, written by Solaris Blue Raven, is a journey through the mind's eye which allows the reader to surf a wave of technological and multidimensional intellect, revealing a bridge between conscious design and the truth. A multidimensional bleed-through awakens the world of artificial intelligence to set sail into the frontiers of a vast multiverse, morphing planets and terraforming ascended worlds beyond the linear programs of a fated race. 1 million miles till midnight will awaken, inspire, prepare, and enlighten one to the many multidimensional states of consciousness and worlds we reside in. With every cell and atom, we are this truth and multiverse. 1 million miles till midnight. Written by Solaris Blue Raven. Available now at Amazon.com. Don't wait. Get your copy today.
It's great. I think it's great. It's great.
The all-new KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Great. Please make a note of it. It's great.
If ever a breed was affectionate to a fault, it's the Golden Retriever. They're people dogs, pure and simple. And the Golden Retriever Rescue of Southern Nevada needs your help. If you would like to volunteer, foster, adopt, or donate, go to the Golden Retriever Rescue of Southern Nevada's website at grrsn.org. That's grrsn.org. Or call 598-GOLD. That's 598-GOLD.
There is a world outside that which we live in, a realm where fact and fiction collide. The Paradigm Matrix. The Paradigm Matrix. Hosted by Willie Miranda. Every Friday night at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern.
The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us, even now in this very room.
The 1-hour show that will surely leave you hanging on the edge of the rabbit hole. The Paradigm Matrix explores a universe of topics from UFOs, cryptozoology, conspiracies, as well as all things paranormal.
Enter a world of the twisted and deformed.
Friday night, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. The Paradigm Matrix. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network, where fact and fiction collide.
You're listening to
UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back to a great night of paranormal talks on KCOR. I want to just mention that coming up next is Mac Maloney's Military X-Files, which my guest has been on before, so stick around and you can check that out. I hopefully can be on his show, or we can have a combined show sometime. That would be a lot of fun. And also Solaris Blue Raven will be on. And I want to just always give a shout out to Tina Marie, because I love her. I appreciate everything that she has done to make KCOR such a great network. And I know it's hard. As a business owner, I know how hard it is. And especially in this paranormal research, we sacrifice a lot of money and a lot of time and blood, sweat, and tears for something. And sometimes we wonder if it really has a purpose. But I thank you, Tina Marie, for everything that you do. And also give a shout out to my friends in chat. Thanks for being here and supporting the show. I am here with Steve Ward, who has been talking about all of these things that I am so interested in. I love it. These window areas, silent contactees, tricksters. I mean, all of this, and flying boxcars. I'm talking to you this week, so you just better remember that. I'm calling you. You got to schedule time.
Well, this is cool.
It is cool.
This is a lot of fun.
And so, with Keel, I mean, just knowing what he went through, and that he really was ahead of his time. And I want to talk a little bit about the electronic surveillance, or some of the harassment that maybe he encountered, or the people that he was in contact with encountered.
Yes. Now, this is interesting, because it seems to me that some of the things that he went through seemed to have paranormal overtones, but it wasn't all. I mean, he had situations where I remember he went out to this Mount Misery on Long Island. That was a focal point of high strangeness in the Mothman prophecies. And he stopped at a hotel at random, and he walks inside, and he says, this guy tells him, Mr. Keel, we've got all these messages for you. And all these nonsensical messages, a place that he decided at the last minute, not just to go in. He used to in the Point Pleasant area in the Ohio Valley. He would do these spot checks where he would just pick a house at random, without any, because he was the UFO guy, right? And people would come to him and tell him their story. And sometimes people would say, hey, I'm going to make up a wild tale to tell this guy. So to prevent that, he would just randomly pick certain houses and find out, because sometimes he would hit pay dirt. He'd find somebody that had some kind of a strange experience. Well, he did this one time. The guy opened the door with a shotgun and said, get the hell out of here. And so he did. He came back the next day with Mary Hyre, the reporter at the Athens Messenger. Everybody knew Mary Hyre. So she went up to the door first and talked to the man. He came out looking kind of sheepish, and he said, boy, I'm sorry, Mr. Keel, but a guy that he thought was one of his friends called him 10 minutes before and said, there's a crazy guy with a beard around here. Don't let him in your house. And again, this house picked at random. How does this happen? And so, and it turned out later that his friend didn't call him at all. His friend was out working on a tractor. So it was somebody else that sounded like this guy's friend. So Keel asked him some of his typical questions. When he said, find out what the person had for breakfast, he had a series of questions about any kind of weird sightings, electronic interference, strange visitors, strange phone calls. Well, this guy, a strange light had been over his farm a couple nights before, scared the heck out of his cows to the point where they stampeded right through his electric fence. And I think the circuit box in his barn was burned out. Okay. So he had a situation like this. But on the other hand, you find out, when you read the Mothman prophecies, he was being harassed. There was the IRS, all kinds of strange phone stuff, and so forth. Well, it turns out that now there's a series of great books that have been published by New Saucerian. They're anthologies of John Keel's articles that go all the way from the, I think, 50s, 60s, 70s, lost stuff that we can get now and read about by John Keel. He did an interview with, the husband and wife that had UFO magazine before the burns. Vicky and it'll come to me. But anyway,
yep.
You know who I mean. Anyway,
I know this is like me trying to figure out mysteries in the skies from Shock Ballet.
Don Ecker.
Oh, Ecker.
Don
Yep.
Ecker. Yes. Great researcher, great couple. Anyway, he interviewed John Keel. This is one of his later interviews, and Keel told him that he had written a critical article on J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI. 2 weeks later, some of the stuff that you hear reported in the Mothman prophecies took place. Now, it's not in the Mothman prophecies, but that's another story too. So anyway, the point there is that some of the stuff was very much of human origin, some of the harassment that he was involved in, very likely anyway. But the other thing about that is Brent Rains told me that John Keel told him, they had a great correspondence over years, that if John had told everything that had happened during the events of the Mothman prophecies, he could have easily filled 6 books. Well, as it was, the editors took the one book he wrote and cut it in half. Half of the Mothman prophecies ended up on the floor. It's now, fortunately, some of that was resurrected into a follow-up book called The Eighth Tower. And also, there's been a book published fairly recently by New Saucerian called The New Breakthrough, which apparently it looks like it was some other stuff that was in the Mothman prophecies that did not get published. And it's fascinating because it gets into the silent contactee aspect, and you get a lot more information. So the bottom line there is you get to the point where what might actually be paranormal or something just kind of outside the realm of a normal explanation, and then what is simply government interference of some sort. So there was both that happened to John Keel.
And this is really interesting. I'm just reading a confidential report, The Telephone Problem in the United States, and this is from John Keel saying the following information is based upon 6 months of intensive research, direct contact with many victims, extensive personal experience. This is a general outline in a very complicated situation involving identical patterns of hoax telephone calls being received in many states. Many of the hoax calls are obvious attempts to falsely implicate numerous individuals in serious crimes. They're malicious, illegal, and represent a potentially dangerous situation. This was back in '68. And I mean, you could look back at this, and I'm just sitting here absolutely stupefied. The wrong number plant, all of these, the innocent hoaxer, the staged call, listening to your phone conversations, hearing loud clicks, dialing sounds, crossed lines, heavy static, all of these things. And this is the same types of things that I hear taking place today.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. He another little story about, I'm repeating myself about John Keel being ahead of his time, but last year I was at a MUFON symposium in the Pittsburgh area, and David Paulides was there, the gentleman that has written the Missing 411 books about the very strange disappearances. And he's sitting next to Stan Gordon, who I mentioned, who's the great researcher from Pennsylvania. And we're all sitting around listening to these guys talk back and forth. And at one point, David Paulides stops and he says, John Keel, he was ahead of his time. And I'm going, yes, because like I say, for so long, he was being forgotten and sometimes marginalized. And now just about everything he's ever written, which was much of it was lost, is out there now. So
where do you think we should go as researchers? What do you think we should focus on, and what should we just completely throw aside?
What I do is I keep finding my passion are connections. And as you know, when I gave my talk at the UFO Contact event, I talked about things like the types of things that stop automobiles, that affect automobiles, like obviously close proximity of UFOs. There was a case of a phantom army that appeared that stopped a car. There's a couple cases where a cryptid shows up that seems to have something like that. So I think that the more we need to keep looking at these high strangest areas, keep looking at patterns. I mean, there's patterns between modern day Men in Black experiences and demonic folklore. There are just so many. There was an event in the 1800s in France. Two sheep herders, they're coming back from tending their sheep. They look down at a ravine and they see, you think this is going to start out as a close encounter of the third kind because it's just sort of an oval or egg-shaped object, all brightly lit. There's a door open. They look inside, and there's a woman crying. When she comes out, she's wearing a robe and a crown. It turns out it's a Marian apparition, a vision of Mary that starts out like a UFO report. Some of you out there will know, and I didn't know this, but some people claim that Bigfoots are responsible for braiding manes of horses, that people will find the horses' manes braided in a certain way, which is pretty bizarre, but people seem to report that. Well, I'm going through the literature of the fairies and folklore, and in Newfoundland, the belief that the fairies do the same thing. So is this a real thing that's happening? And if so, are we talking about an elemental that can take different shapes? So my research is just accumulating as much data as we can and making connections, being open to connections. I give the example where Rosemary Ellen Guiley, who of course has been in the field of the paranormal for years. She was doing research into shadow people, and she found out that when she was interviewing people that were having these experiences, that they were also classic alien abductees, a large percentage of them. Now, who would have seen that coming? So this is helpful because I interviewed a lady on the phone from New Hampshire about a year and a half ago. And she told me about the experience she and her husband had with this large triangular craft came over their house. What had happened was they saw these strange lights. It was early in the morning. They're near an airport, but they're very familiar with conventional aircraft. And all of a sudden, they're not standing next to each other, but they're on opposite ends of the porch. They look up and see this giant triangular craft coming over, brushing the tops of the trees. And then, like so many people have to have these experiences, they don't think anything of it at the time, and they turn around and go back to bed. Later on, they wake up and think, man, was that strange? And then they find out they're missing a half an hour. So at that time, she was not able to be regressively hypnotized, but later on she was. So what I did was I asked her a series of John Keel questions, and I found out that she had experienced shadow people. She saw one at work moving along the wall. Both her sons experienced orb phenomena. One of the young one experienced these orange orbs dancing outside his bedroom window. The other one saw an orb come up to him in the house, circle him, and take off. And then I said, this is going to sound like a really strange question, but have you ever seen anything like a Bigfoot or some kind of strange animal? And she said, well, no. And then she said, oh, wait a minute. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law saw something in this area. And she went on to describe a panther-like creature standing on two legs near a tree. When it saw them, it took off.
Wow.
Now, if I had been frozen in the 1960s, this happy-go-lucky guy that loved Close Encounters of the Third Kind and little aliens in their silver suits jumping out of their egg-shaped craft, I never would have pursued that, But because of people like Rosemary Ellen Guiley and John Keel and Jacques Vallée, we have a much better basis. And also, I might add, people like you and Nick Redfern and John Tinney and the wave of newer people, so-called, if we want to call us newer people, from the old guard, that's where we need to go. We need to really, it's fine. It's perfectly fine to specialize and focus in a certain area, but leave that door open just a little bit, because you just don't know. You might be like my buddy Brian out there looking for Bigfoot, and he sees a classic UFO coming overhead.
Well, and I think for me, the thing that has been a little disheartening in the United States is that we don't share data. We're all about, okay, I'm going to keep this, and this is my claim to fame, and I'm going to sit on 50 years of data and then not help the other person. And that's what I like about you and some of the other people that I've been working with. And I have to give, hats off and huge props to Barry Greenwood, who is the world's foremost archivist, who is preserving history and who has helped me tremendously. I mean, it's like people, the good people who care about the subject are willing to share and move forward. And that's what we have to do. That's really critical.
Yeah, it's there's so many. I wish we had more time, because there are just so many of these things. I mentioned to you off air a little bit. I was looking into some of the, of course, David Paulides' research, the Missing 411, has just been fascinating. And I should mention that if you do pursue the Missing 411 books, don't get them from Amazon, because there are only third-party sellers there, and they jack the price way up. Go to, I think it's Can-Am Missing 411, and seek out the books at David's website. But anyway, he these bizarre disappearances that are, and we're not just talking about people that want to get lost and start a new life somewhere. These are really bizarre. And we won't have much time to go into this, but people have tried to grapple with what's going on. And, some of these things could be explained by UFOs. Some could be explained by Bigfoot. Some could be explained by some really bizarre, intense government conspiracy. But the one thing, strangely, that I won't say explains, but parallels much of these incidents is folklore, in the same way that there seems to be a connection between some modern-day UFO experiences and the classic folklore tales of the little people.
Isn't that, I love this, and it is so fascinating. And I would love to have David on my show. In fact, he sent me his book, Missing 411, a few years ago, and I will have him on, and I would love to do that. I know he's been really, really busy, but I mentioned to you off air briefly that when I was talking to Junior Hicks, I had called him and told him what happened to me when I was up near Skinwalker Ranch, and he said I would have immediately gotten out there, and when you witness things like that, this is how people disappear. And I thought that was just, stunning. I'm glad I'm still here to talk about what I saw.
Yeah, I know. Ever since I started reading those books, I start looking over my shoulder. Even when I'm with a group of people out somewhere, you really these stories are really heartrending because some of these children and adults are found dead or completely gone. The ones that are the most fascinating, though, that I would say, people, if you get these books and check them out, check out the ones where the people are found and do come back. They usually have memory lapses, or they're befuddled. They can't really tell you very clearly what happened to them. And there's that same parallel with fairy folklore and some modern day UFO experiences. It's just, I think some people might think that, oh, you're being lazy. You just want to connect everything together. No, it doesn't matter what you do. You pursue a certain path and you say, holy crap, I'll be damned. It's taken me right back around to this other thing right here.
And I love that. And I know, I mean, every day, the more research I do, I'm just absolutely stunned and excited, even though sometimes it gets a little bit disheartening, but there's so many parallels and so many fascinating roads this leads down. It's just never a dull moment.
It's so hard to keep it all together. I have found books that I'll look at and say, well, see, I think I started that, and I'll open it up, and it's filled with notes in the margins that I made, but I don't remember writing them. So I don't know what to do about that. But man, it's very hard to compress, get all this information in one area so you can kind of process it. I just don't have one of those Mensa type memories that can keep it all together right in front of me.
You know what? And I'm a meticulous note taker, and so I love, and my brain, I'm an artist, and so I have a different way of processing information, but I will sit back, every week and review notes from years ago, and then all of a sudden a light will go on and a pattern will emerge, and it's like boom, boom, boom. Okay, here we go. And it's such a fun process for me to see the way that this is all unfolding.
That's really cool.
I know. I love it. And I can't wait to talk to you off the air because we've got a lot of things that we can do as far as research. But I want to ask you, do you feel that the UFO community or, the paranormal community is perhaps being manipulated and there are people in the community trying to steer us away from the truth of the matter? Or is that a paranoid delusion?
Well, it's something we should be aware of. Not to look. It only takes two people with some power up to something to have a conspiracy. So it's possible. I don't jump on the conspiracy bandwagon all the time, but we do know. I mean, Nick Redfern, through Freedom of Information, has found out that the government has. They were checking out UFO groups back in the 50s and 60s, and it's not at all wild to think that there are operatives in there trying to plant a little bit of this and that. So that's why we have to be careful. When we're dealing with this research, we're relying on the testimony of people because this is stuff we can't put in a laboratory. So occasionally we're going to get skunked. Occasionally we're going to believe something that isn't true. We just have to, be straightforward and honest about it and move on. So yes, it is possible that there are some ringers in there trying to lead us in a different direction.
And for me, it's when I get out in the field, when I go visit a hot spot and talk to the witnesses in the surrounding area, or really turn away from the quote unquote UFO community, that's when I find these wonderful nuggets that help me and I believe in turn will help all of us. And I'm sure you're the same way when you get out there and talk to people that have nothing to do with the community. They're just honest people that have had sightings that aren't being contaminated by, some of these groups.
Well, you talk to people, people say there's nothing to this. About a month ago, my car broke down. The tow truck guy saw my Mothman bumper sticker on the back. So on the way back from the tow, he's telling me about the strange creature he saw down in Georgia when he was on patrol in the military there, some strange cryptid on 4 legs. I get back. The car repair guy sees my Mothman T-shirt and says, did I ever tell you about the UFO I saw northwest of Detroit out in the country? And proceeds to tell me his classic encounter. And then a couple of weeks later, my dentist, he said, what are you doing this summer? Well, I'm speaking here and there about UFOs and so forth. Did I ever tell you about the UFO I saw up north? You know, everybody, not everybody, but so many people have had these experiences, and it doesn't go any further than a few friends. It's
Isn't that it is. And I have, people in my Pilates studio will come in and say, this happened to me 10 years ago in Alaska. And I mean, people you would never, ever expect. I've been communicating with this family, and the 82-year-old father had significant sightings in Utah, and I never would have known that. But now I'm working with this family to record and preserve his testimony. And it's like, yes, it is so freaking cool. So I love the fact that you're out there and you are getting in touch with these people and empowering them to talk about their sightings. That is critical. And Steve, I just think the world of you. I'm so stoked that you're my friend.
Well, thank you so much, Erica. I look forward to the day when I would be on Erica's show. I never dreamed I'd have a chance to meet you. So
no, that makes me. I just am so humbled, and I love it. This is such an exciting process for me, and I feel like we're both in a special place, and we have. I know that we're here for a reason, and I know that I met you for a reason, and we've got some great work that we're going to do together. And thank you. Well, and so, thank you. And well, I'll call you. Oh, excuse me. Go ahead.
Oh, good. No, I was just saying, I'd love to come back sometime. This is so much fun, and we just barely got into it.
Oh, you'll be back. Don't worry about it. Yes, thank you so much, Steve Ward. Well, and I want to absolutely. And I want to just say that Willie Miranda is going to be here next on the Paradigm Matrix. So stick around because he has a really great guest, Nomar Slevik, who is author of UFOs over Maine: Close Encounters from the Pine Tree State. So that should be great. Stick around for KCOR. It's a great night of programming. I will be back next week, and feel free to message me on Facebook. Find my website, UFO Classified, that I will be updating, and I'm in the process of editing some really great interviews that I have spent years and years conducting in the field in Norway, Skinwalker Ranch. So, stay tuned. The best is yet to come. Stick around for Willie Miranda, and I will catch you next week.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at UFOclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south